Hello everyone! I would like first of all to thank the organizers of this meeting for inviting me here today. I'm here today to present timeline of benchmarks in agriculture development in China, Egypt and Europe. I have divided my presentation into three main parts: the history of agriculture in Egypt, China and Europe, the origins of pesticides and fertilizers, similarity and difference between Egypt and China agriculture. I will start by the first part. More than 2 million years ago, our ancestors gathered and hunted in different parts of the globe. They gradually learned to use rough stone tools and fire in their fire against wild beasts. Fire increased the activity time of primitive humans, protected them from fierce animals, and promoted human beings from gathering and hunting to settlement. At this stage, humans only hunted and collected animals and plants in nature and did not engage in agricultural production. The transition from hunter-gatherer groups to farming communities seems to have taken place about 12,000 years ago. Primitive agriculture mainly occurred in a few places with similar geographical and climatic conditions between 10 degrees south and 14 degrees north latitude. Arable farming, or the cultivation of crops on a large scale on large areas of agricultural land, first appeared at the beginning of the Neolithic Age. Water is not only the basis of agriculture, but also the cradle of culture. The seasonal flooding of the Nile had allowed since the 9th millennium BC to irrigate the cultivable land of its valley and deposit nutrient-rich soil on the land, allowing for the cultivation of crops. The ancient Egyptians settled on the shore of the Nile and carried out agricultural and animal husbandry production activities. Ancient Egyptians attached importance to water conservancy construction, Hammurabi Code, specifically for the responsibility of the dig, repair, mate composition, prevention. By the end of pre-dynastic period, the ancient Egyptians used Nile water for irrigation and dug ditches to drain the water that was left when the Nile flooded. The Old Kingdom had a significant development in hydraulic engineering, especially in the aristocratic territories. There were large hydraulic engineering. During the New Kingdom period, the development of water technology in Egypt was mainly embodied in the invention and use of shadaf. The facility is usually built along a river or canal for irrigation, which replaced the outdated technology of carrying water for irrigation. The Egyptians were one of the first groups on earth to begin farming, probably around 10,000 BC, but definitely by 52,000 BC. Gramineous cereal was the first crop cultivated by the ancient Egyptians. The Egyptians grew a variety of crops for consumption, including grains, vegetables, and fruits. The diet of the ancient Egyptians revolved around a few major crops, especially grains, barley, and wheat. Other staple foods for most populations are dominated by legumes, including lentils, chickpeas, and broad beans. Root crops such as onion, garlic, and radishes were grown, along with salad crops such as lettuce, cucumbers, and basil. The most common fruits were dates, but they also consumed fruits like fig, grapes, melon, apple, and pomegranate. After the floods receded, the ancient Egyptians began to sow. At first they dig holes with sticks, which was laborious and slow. The prototype hoe can be seen as a modification of a forked branch which was used to plow cultivated land. The plow was at first a modification of the hoe, originally drawn through the ground, perhaps first by a man with Europe and improved to a pair of oxen by the Old Kingdom. The sower scatters the seed in the furrows and allows oxen coats or beaks to bury the grain that has trampled the ground. Once the grain was ripe, the Egyptians harvested it with sickles, and the farmers used pitchforks to store it in a safe, dry place. The Egyptians used wooden forks to remove the lighter chaff and straw from the grain, and then they used sieves made of reeds and palm leaves to filter out the longer chaff and weeds. Finally, the Egyptians stored the harvested grain until it could be eaten. The Nile Valley is home to the world's oldest known scenes of pastoralism and animal domestication. Evidence of cattle use was found at to the Tushka cemetery, as well as domestication and Nabta Palaya. Milk, meat, horns, and hide were obtained from cattle, and they were a prized possession of the people in the region. In addition to cattle, the ancient Egyptians keep sheep, goats, and pigs. Sheep and goats were considered by the Egyptians to be small cattle, and they were kept for their meat, milk, and hide. The local breed of domestic pig in ancient Egypt descended from an indigenous ancestor, Sas scrofa, which was the source of meat for most civilians. Poultry such ducks, geese, and pigeons were captured in nets and bred on farms, where they were force-fed with dough to fatten them. With the expansion of the country, Egypt was conquered by the Persians in 525 BC and conquered by Alexander the Emperor in 323 BC. Since then, the ancient Egyptian farming civilization lost its luster. Ancient China's agriculture had 6 stages of development, including the embryonic period of agriculture technology, Neolithic Age, the initial formation period of agricultural technology, early spring and autumn period of intensive farming, warring states period, the formation period of intensive farming technology in dryland in northern China, Qi, Han, Southern and Northern dynasties, the formation period of intensive paddy field cultivation in the south, Sui, Tang, Song and Yuan, intensive farming in depth development period, Ming to early Qing dynasty. The transition from hunting and gathering to cultivation of wild plants was initiated by semi-sedentary communities some 11,000 years ago. Among the earliest East Asian pioneering foragers were those who lived in North China who started cultivating wild millet. Within 1 or 2 millennia, the annually cultivated millet became domesticated and was joined by culling and eventual domestication of dogs and pigs. Stable food production and storage allowed for a rapid demographic increase and the spread of villages to the periphery of the cow area. As early as Neolithic Age, primitive agriculture had taken shape in the Yellow River Basin and Yangtze River Basin of China. The real lowland in the north was mainly planted with dry crops such as millet and wheat, where rice was widely planted in the south, which has a history of at least 7 or 8 thousand years. Lazy is an agricultural tour invited by Shenyang, our ancestral, used for plowing the land and sowing crops in agricultural production. It was originally made of stone or bone and later changed to bronze. The appearance of iron farming tools and using cattle to cultivate the land greatly improved the efficiency of agricultural production in the spring and autumn period. Iron making technology entered the historical stage during the spring and autumn period. The establishment of the Qing dynasty marked the first time that Chinese agriculture entered a period of overall development. The Qing dynasty used centralized power to set up agricultural officials step by step to manage and supervise agricultural production. The implementation of land ownership by military landlords and self-cultivators promoted the development of private land ownership. When Emperor Wu of the Han dynasty, Zhang invited the coupled plough with 2 oxen for ploughing. After the Han dynasty, iron plough and oxen ploughing became the main farming method of traditional agriculture in China. These swing tools invented in Western Han dynasty are the prototype of modern drill machines. The economic center of gravity of China shifted from the north to the south between 581 and 1368. The improved carved plough in the Tang dynasty is a sign of the maturity of Chinese ploughing technology. The formation of supporting technology of South body field technology, the invention and popularization of body field special agricultural tools. Cotton was gradually promoted in China, and many peasant books appeared. According to Shen Min Yao Shou, there were 34 kinds of fruit trees and 31 kinds of vegetables in China during this period. Land use increased, and agriculture in the north and south developed gradually. From 1368 to 1840 AD, the contradiction between more people and less land generally appeared in China, and agricultural production developed to further intensive cultivation. In terms of cultivation technology, technologies such as winter grain method, wheat transplanting, and sweet potato seed saving were created during this period. In terms of field management technology, repeated stalking technology was created, and cotton bringing, rice cultivating, and field raising technology were developed. From the middle of Ming dynasty, corn, sweet potato, tobacco, peanuts, and other crops originally from America were introduced to China. In the developing process of world agriculture, the condition of modern agriculture is the capitalism of agriculture. After Watt invented the steam engine in 1769, the British textile industry developed vigorously. The three nursery system adopted in Britain could not meet the development demand of textile industry, which led to the enclosure movement in Britain. Land was relatively concentrated, and the combination of capital and concentrated land was realized. Agricultural capitalism began to flourish, and modern agriculture began to take off. Modern agriculture is the stage with the fastest development of agricultural machinery. The application of agricultural machinery reduces labor intensity and meets the industrial demand for agricultural raw materials. The first lawnmower was invented in 1805. In 1820, the Englishman Brown invented the harvester. In 1825, the United States built the first horse-drawn cotton planter. In 1836, the United States patented the first combine harvester, and in 1889, the first cotton harvester was manufactured. The steam tractor was introduced in France in 1874. In 1889, the first internal combustion steam tractor was produced in the United States, but its practical application value was not high due to its low power. The first utility tractor was introduced in the United States in 1892. In 1931, the diesel tractor was born, and the United States quickly entered into agricultural mechanization. Passing now to part 2, the origins of pesticides and fertilizers. The Mockery of Agricultural Chemistry, a German scientist, Liebig, published the monograph The Application of Chemistry in Agriculture and Plant Physiology in 1840, clearly put forward the theory of plant nutrient mineralogy and nutrient return. In 1838, Rose in the United Kingdom treated phosphate rock with sulfuric acid to make the world's first chemical fertilizer, superphosphate, and opened the first chemical fertilizer factory. In 1861, carnallite potassium was first mined in Stassfurt, Germany, and Liebig announced that it could be used as potash fertilizer. The successful development of enrichment and refining technology has laid a foundation for improving the grade of potash fertilizer. In the late 19th century, ammonia began to be recovered from gas to make ammonium sulfate or ammonia water for use as nitrogen fertilizer. The first synthetic N fertilizer was calcium nitrate, made in 1933 from nitric acid produced by the electric arc process. In 1920, the ammonium phosphate production plant of the American Cyanide Company was put into operation, producing the first compound fertilizer. In fact, pesticides originated in China as early as 3,000 years ago. Chinese people began to fight against insect pests. Compendium of Materia Medica describes at least 1,819 kinds of drugs, many of which are pesticides for the prevention and control of diseases and insect pests. Ancient Egyptians also experimented with pesticides. The papyrus, the oldest known medical document, describes over 800 recipes, many containing recognizable substances that were used as potions and pesticides. In 1763, smoke-grind lime powder was used to control aphids in France, which was the first reported insecticide in the world. In 1874, German Zidra synthesized DDT by chemical method. In 1882, the French botanist Miller accidentally discovered Bordeaux solution. In 1934, the Frenchman Dippa synthesized 666 chemical pesticides were widely used in agriculture during the 1930s and 1940s. The early modern chemicals were developed from environmentally stable compounds, and pesticide residues began to appear in unexpected biological systems. For these reasons, most organochlorine compounds were banned in 1970s and 1980s, and high efficiency and low toxicity became the opening direction for pesticides. I will pass to the three parts: similarity and difference between Egypt and China agriculture. Egypt and China are both traditionally been agrarian economies. Well over half of its people continue to depend on land for their livelihood. The agriculture sector provides the basic foundation for the industrial expansion with surplus food, raw material, and labor. The pace of industrial advance is severely constrained by the vagaries of agriculture production, and dependence on it as a direct source of income is also very substantial. After all these years of industrialization, similar concerns on issues such as food security. Differences in Egypt and China agriculture. The way this difference lies in the diverging productivity level of various crops and in the differential mix of the crop and non-crop segments in the overall composition of the farm sector. The rate of growth in the Horticulture sector, fruits and vegetables in China is double that of Egypt. The reason for China having outperformed Egypt in agriculture are threefold: technological improvement occurring from research and development, investment in rural infrastructure development, increasing liberalized agriculture policy. Thank you so much for your attention.